Tom Gozlowski here with you on 104.5 The Team and 104.5theteam.com, joined by Andrew Williams as well. And joining us on the phone lines, he covers college football and NASCAR for Yahoo Sports. And yesterday, he was on campus in Missouri for the events following their school president, their chancellor, their students, and much more. Joining us at Nick Bromberg on Twitter. And first of all, Nick, I would put your account up with anybody out in the country yesterday for how well you captured those images and emotions in Columbia yesterday. Let's first start with Jonathan Butler, the student that was on the hunger strike. What was it like watching him address the crowd on campus yesterday?
I walked out. I arrived there. I live in Kansas City. It's about a 2-hour drive from me. I arrived in the middle of Butler's rally. There were easily 1,000 students, and it was a powerful scene. Butler was flanked by other students and members of the Concerned Students 1950 movement. And, what resonated with me is the chance of, this is not a moment, this is a movement. And everybody was involved, and it got the crowd riled up. It was a very positive scene. And then from there, it kind of became odd, is I guess the best term to use right now. Butler was escorted away. He did not do any media availability. He made his statement, and then he left. He was escorted to a waiting car about one building away or so from the circle. And it was very odd. It was almost a Hollywood-esque paparazzi scene. He was flanked by about 10 different people covering him up. When he got into the car, there were sweatshirts guarding the windshield and the passenger side. It was an absolutely fascinating thing because, he'd become such a central figure. He was wearing a hospital bracelet. It was clear he had gone to the hospital, maybe gotten fluids or had been there for something. And, the hunger strike was over. And so now, this voluntary hunger strike, he got the football team's platform, changed it. And then all of a sudden, based off what we saw in that YouTube video and things like that, it became a very interesting day in terms of the way the protesters were interacting with the media after that.
Yeah, and you bring up the YouTube video, how they'd used media before, but then the protesters that you touched on didn't want to talk to you guys. It seemed as if they were trying to block the media away. How surprised were you that these people that had used the media to have almost this power and begin their movement were so anti-media, it seemed, yesterday?
I was surprised. And, I think that's also distracting from the story. The movement was about Missouri. If you're not familiar with the movement, Missouri, before fall semester, they cut the healthcare subsidies for graduate students. Jonathan Butler is a graduate student. There was a long, drawn-out process with a political representative who represents Columbia, where Missouri is, regarding Planned Parenthood and the University of Missouri hospital system. Ultimately, ended up in the revocation of an abortion doctor's rights at at the university system. And then there was the spiraling of all the racial incidents that people felt university leadership had not taken control of. So the racial part of the movement went to the forefront, and then with the way that it was handled in terms of the media. The media there to cover the media, traditional media outlets picking this up on social media, especially on Saturday when the football players released their statement. That set this in motion. This went from being, it was covered in the Washington Post last week, but it went from being a fringe national story and a big local story to something that I think we can all agree dominated the national headlines for the previous 48 hours. Mm-hmm. So, it just absolutely exponentially grew, and then all of a sudden, it became a safe space, where the campsite was at the Carnahan Quadrangle, public property since it's at the University of Missouri. The buzzword was safe space, and it was very interesting to see, how this movement was being captured. All of a sudden, the attention that helped it get to where it was not wanted.
And Nick, all right, like you said, everything moved so fast, but these students woke up today. They went to class. The players went to practice. They're at the facilities. What's the next step in what's going on right now? Are you shocked about how fast everything went forward?
A little bit, but ultimately I'm not. If you've been following anything about Mizzou, this was, I believe, spiraling. I went to Missouri, and so I live in Kansas City, so I'm very close to the university. I believe this was heading down a road that was going to end in some sort of conflict, whether it be somebody losing their job, like we saw yesterday, a resignation from both the chancellor and the president or something. Recently, just I believe it was last week, English department, 26-0 vote of no confidence in the chancellor. Tensions were brewing because of these incidents. And then so the movement and the football team getting involved really showed the power of sports in this. You can have this debate. Was it a news story? Was it a sports story? Ultimately, I think when the football team gets involved here, it makes a statement because this is a sports story. We show the power of sports. And ultimately, as a lot of us at Yahoo Sports have written, Dan Wetzel had a great column about it. This shows the power that student athletes can have because they boycotted practice. This lasted basically Sunday and Monday, 2 days, of the week of a BYU game, a game with a 4-5 Missouri team, a 7-2 BYU team. Not exactly a game on the national radar, but look what happened. You put a big team out here, or you've got, to go crazy on the example, what if a team made it to the Final Four and boycotted over cost of attendance scholarships or lack of pay or something that they disagreed with? This shows, and Missouri defensive end Charles Harris, he made this clear when they made their statement Monday night was, hey, we have a voice. You all out there, athletes everywhere, you have power. You can use this for good if you'd like.
Well said, Nick. I look to the future. I think this is going to have ramifications, whether it be 5, 10, 20 years down the line, and showing the power of college athletics. He covers college football and NASCAR for Yahoo Sports, a Mizzou alum there in Columbia yesterday with all the effects of what happened in Missouri. Nick Bromberg joins us on the phone lines. And, Nick, you were right there. I almost compared it to, I guess, in a sports analogy, like Krzyzewskiville or Bayheimburg you see in college basketball, students camping out for the big event, but this is students out in Columbia, and you're there. Your Twitter, @Nick Bromberg, shows it. What was it like talking to the students? What was their mindset? Were they aggressive? Were they passive? Because when you have this huge amount of people that are out there in this cause and this movement, you might get different people you're bumping into. What were the actual students you bumped into like?
There was a wide range of emotions. I admittedly did not see. I've seen the YouTube video multiple times. Obviously, I was not there. I did not see that firsthand. But talking to students, it was interesting. I was told by some local media outlets, they had stopped talking to local media, and so you ask some people questions, and they didn't want to talk, and I'd understand that. Then you'd have some very good conversations with others, and I think there was some self-awareness there of, hey, this is happening, but ultimately this is just the first step. And I think I'm hoping that's a representative sample, so to speak, because, okay, life isn't really that much different for Missouri students right now. The tents are still going to be there. I went up and asked somebody, I said, so how long are the tents going to be there? And they said, we want a meeting with the Board of Curators. They still want to have a meeting. And so the tents aren't going anywhere. They actually have changed their media stance as of Tuesday. They're now welcoming media, and they're letting media into the campsite because that was a big pushback, was they were camping on public property, did not want media involved, even though, just like they do, media had the right, and anybody had the right to be on that public property. So this continues. And now it's time, I think, both parties, the university showed it was listening. So now it's time for both parties to come together, work for these positive changes that the Concerned Student 1950 group wants, diversity training. They want leaders that will listen. They would ask for more minority members of faculty and staff. Can both sides come together and make a lasting change? And I do think those involved recognize that this is going to be a long process. It's not something that was simply solved Monday. It just was the first step.
And Nick, you've already said you're an alumni of the university. This is nothing new to you, what's happening there. How did you feel yesterday when you were on campus? These areas that you walked through, you went to lunch there, you ate there, you studied there. How was your feelings there yesterday?
My first feeling was, oh my goodness, because Missouri, the Student Center, the things that are there now, it's unbelievable. Missouri had seen an enrollment spike with the success of the football team. It coincided with that 2007 season, but it felt like Missouri, And there's always been where the rally was Traditions Circle or Traditions Plaza. Next to Traditions Plaza has been a place called Speaker Circle, and that traditionally at Missouri for years and years and years and years has where people have gathered, have rallies, somebody goes in the middle, you just talk about whatever. And that's kind of where grassroots movement started. So it just felt to me like a larger scale of the Speaker Circle has shifted over. And this was something that students were realizing. And it's a learning experience, I think. Students are realizing the power that they do have to affect change. And to me, what I found fascinating about this, there were 7 flags behind where the rally was held. They were all Mizzou flags. One on each side said Mizzou our time to lead. And I thought that was incredibly appropriate based on what we were happening because, when you go to college, we're all impressionable. We all take stands that sometimes we later regret, or we handle things that we wish we would have handled differently. I think this was a leadership learning experience in that the students realized, hey, we can affect change, we can cause a discussion, bring these things to a national light. And at the same time, with the way events have transpired, it's also a learning experience to say, all right, hey, we can handle this better. We can do this better. We should have realized the First Amendment rights that apply to us also apply to everyone else. I think this is a big learning experience. And ultimately, as long as this keeps moving forward, it's going to be, I think, a positive for most everybody involved.
Nick, we're going to let you go. I know you're busy writing some articles for Yahoo, covering college football, covering this event, NASCAR, all those things, but we're going to make sure to feature your stuff here on 104.5, on Twitter, at Nick Bromberg. Do yourself a favor and check out all the coverage he's had over the past 48 hours of everything going on in Columbia, Missouri. Nick, thank you so much for the time, man. We'll talk again soon. Take care.
Thanks for having me.